for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he sent away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his descendants forever. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Around our church campus, Marys are everywhere. Our Lady can be found in stone and in oils, in wood and in fabric. Some of the depictions of her are overly sentimental. Some are masterpieces. Some are quintessential examples of folk art. Some are better than others. Perhaps if you've come to the Episcopal Church from another tradition, you've been struck by all of these Marys around a church called St. Mary's. If in a previous life you were, say, a Baptist, it might all weird you out a little bit. It's Jesus we worship here, right? If you were Roman Catholic, then you might find them comforting, or perhaps the very opposite. Maybe they remind you of something that you're trying to leave behind. No matter how you feel about the artistic representations of St. Mary the Virgin, I ask you on this, our observance of her feast day and our namesake as a church, that you might consider them once again. In almost all of our Marys around here, you'll find one firmly entrenched artistic convention. It transcends styles and historical eras and religious traditions. This convention concerns Mary's disposition to the Christ that she either holds or is pictured near. I'll give you 3 examples from here on our campus. The first is there in the narthex. So as you leave church today, make sure you take note. There hangs a very large canvas with an oil painting of Mary and the infant Jesus. It's fairly standard in style. To a trained artist or art connoisseur, it probably appears rather pedestrian. But I can say that because I picked it out and I like it anyway. Perhaps this conventional painting makes the best example of our technique in question because it employs it so baldly. On your way out today, look at the painting and notice Mary's hand. She holds the Christ child in her arms, yet on one of her hands she extends one finger, the indexed finger, the pointer finger. This was not happenstance. It's all, of course, on purpose with the artist. Though she stares straight ahead at the viewers, she motions for us to shift our attention elsewhere. She is pointing directly at Jesus. She looks out at the viewers, unembarrassed and unafraid, but with perfect knowledge of her right place in the whole scheme of things. It may have been through her flesh that God came to dwell among us, but ultimately even she knows that the incarnation is about God, not her. As noble a vessel as she may be, she is but still a vessel. The second example hangs here in our transept. It's a bit more sentimental than the first one in the narthex. This painter has kept things slightly out of focus, washing things in a bit of light. In this painting, Mary holds Jesus up close, snuggling him, if you will. There's no overt pointing in this painting. In fact, the most overt gesture that you'll see in this one is the Christ child's hand reaching up and grabbing hold of her hand, as infants are prone to do. It's a natural depiction of a sweet moment. Yet with that snuggling tilt of Mary's head, the same convention peeks through. This time, it's her head that does the pointing. Her gaze and her head are turned away from the viewer and toward the infant Jesus. She demurs, bidding that we turn our attention away from her and toward her son. She may be the idealized image of a loving mother, but ultimately her love is but a glimpse of the kind of love that her son has for all of creation. Our final example is found in the Chapel of Christ the King across the street in the Community Life Center. There on either side of the tremendous Christus Rex that hangs behind the altar are two very large icons, written or painted for us by Abba Justinian of the Greek Church in Nablus in the West Bank. They stand aside the cross as they do in John's depiction of that moment in the Gospel according to John. One of John and one of Mary, one of Mary and one of John on either side of that cross, forming that scene that we know as a rood scene, R-O-O-D. Mary is alone in her icon. She isn't holding Jesus, but instead turns her whole body sideways and up, her arms and hands in motion, as it were, captured only still because of the icon. Her whole being, then, points away from herself and toward her son. On that day on Calvary, a sword of grief may indeed have pierced her own heart, but it is Christ's pain and death and triumph over them that she wants us to notice. In all three examples, Mary redirects our gaze toward Jesus. Mary's whole life points toward the Christ. And in that Christ, she points us toward a radically different way of understanding how God works in the world. The Mary who would bear Jesus was likely 14 or 15 years old, living in a know-nothing town, engaged to a much older man, when the angel of the Lord appears to her and declares that she will bear God's son. Had it been the daughter of a king or of the emperor even, that might have made more sense. But God chose to enter into creation through a common villager. Mary herself didn't miss the irony. Indeed, the song that she sang after her yes to God makes the unlikeliness of the whole affair clear in no uncertain terms. She says, "For he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant." Her song makes clear that what God is up to in the world has nothing to do with power or with privilege. Indeed, power and privilege must be put in their place in order for the will of God to be fulfilled. Mary sings, "He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones. He has sent the rich away empty." The common assumptions, those that power and privilege mean God's favor, are turned on their heads. God favors, it turns out, the outcasts, the poor, the prisoners, the neglected, the marginalized. The plan of God The gospel of salvation has absolutely nothing to do with power or establishing one group over another. It has everything to do with leveling the playing field, with evening the odds, and with second, third, fourth, and fifth chances. Isaiah foretold the coming of the Lord with imagery of smoothing out a road. The Lord is coming, Isaiah says, and when he does, watch what happens, because all the obstacles between God and humanity will be obliterated. Mountains will be brought down and valleys lifted up and rough places paved over. Crookedness will be straightened. As a parish dedicated to Mary, we have a special role in joining our namesake in pointing toward this Christ of level playing field, of second, third, fourth, and fifth chances, of even odds. As we celebrate the feast of the one who so perfectly points to God and God's remaking of all that is, I ask us to consider one question. It's a question of the utmost importance and strikes at the very heart of our vocation as Christians. To what or to whom do our lives point? Were someone to paint a painting of you or of me, what would we be looking at? What would we be holding? To what would we be gesturing? To who, to whom, or to what are our lives pointing? Make it Jesus.